player. At times I'm a studio conveyor. Mr. Dinkins, would you please be my mayor? You'll be doing us a really big favor. Boy, this track really has a lot of flavor. When it comes to rhythms, Quest is your savior. Follow us for the funky behavior. Make a note on the rhythm we gave you. Feel free, drop your pants, check your hair. Do you like the garments that we wear? I instruct you to be the obeyer. A rhythm recipe that you savor. Doesn't matter if you're minor or major. Yes, the tribe of the game with a player. As you inhale like a breath of fresh air.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ooh, that made the music go off. I'm so impressed. Welcome. We're so great to see so many of you here. It's nice to be at a convention outside of Indianapolis. Nice to be back in person with so many of you. I am Lydia Bell, the Director of Research and Policy at the NCAA, moderating today's session. And we are focusing on coaches and mental well-being, a really important topic, and how administrators can support our coaches in terms of mental health, and really creating a culture of mental wellness across our athletics department. In my role at the national office, I do oversee a lot of data collection, particularly around the student-athlete experience and around projects looking at the social experiences of those in our athletics departments. And so I really enjoy working with the membership to share some of these data points and thinking about policy changes and supporting many of our member committees who are examining some of these issues. I am thrilled to be joined by four outstanding panelists who will be doing most of the talking today. I am just moderating. One note, though, is, as typical, and like when you go to the movies nowadays, we just ask that you all consider silencing your phones, just so nothing pops up. Also, this session will be recorded and will be shared on the NCAA convention platform. All right, so we have designed this to be a very conversational panel. So not only conversation among our panelists, but also making sure that we give time for all of you to pipe in and ask your questions. So we'll pause in the middle and open it up for questions from any of you. And then we'll also save time at the end to make sure that we're addressing your questions as well. So just keep that in mind. Be thinking if you have a question, we'll have a time to have it answered by the members of our panel. As you all know, mental wellness is not a new topic at all for us. It's been actually one of the most popular topics at NCAA convention in at least the last 5 or so years. We've been having more and more conversations around mental health, not only association-wide, but then, of course, Division II specific conversations. And, I think it's also really important to note the work of our Division II National SAC body and how much they have really championed this conversation around mental health and have really ensured that this is something that is at the forefront of our minds. How do we make sure that our student athletes are having an experience that promotes their mental wellness? But then how do we think more broadly about this in terms of our culture across Division II? So really, really important to note how awesome National SAC has been in this space. So we thank all of you for that. All right, so what our panel is today, as again, this conversation is specifically around the culture of supporting coaches within the athletics department. How do we support our coaches and then support our coaches as they are supporting our student athletes? And so we've got some great staff members from Division II here to speak to all of you. First, immediately to my left is Nate Gibson. He is the Executive Director of Athletics. We also have Dr. Jess Kirby, a professor and assistant director of the school's Center for Critical Sport Studies. Nate has been with the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs for 17 years. He looks way too young for that. The last 7, he has been the athletics director, and he's also a member of the Division II Championships Committee. And Jess is a researcher who focuses on exploring the sport and physical activity experiences of individuals across the lifespan, as well as the impact of social connection and peer relationships. Part of the reason that they are here, though, is because the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs was one of our 5 recipients of the NCAA Innovations Grant this past year. For those of you who may not be aware, the NCAA Innovations Grant is a grant that supports practical applications in our athletics department's campus-based programs that support student-athlete well-being. And actually, all of our panelists today have an innovations connection, which is really cool. They have some current projects going. So at Colorado Springs, their grant project this current year, and by the way, we had 5 projects and 3 of them were at Division II institutions, our highest level of awardees ever this year for Division II. So their project is called Mountain Lion Strong. It's a mental health program that really helps student athletes, coaches, and peer wellness leaders with mental health screenings. They do work in suicide prevention training to optimize the psychological well-being of their student athletes, and then also really working to reduce mental health stigma, for the campus culture. And so that's really one of their main priorities. Then we also have Hannah Lance, the Assistant Director of Academics and Compliance and the Senior Woman Administrator at Texas A&M Kingsville. They also received an Innovations Grant for efforts that they are taking to enhance mental wellness for first-year student athletes specifically. During her time at Kingsville, Hannah has collaborated with her coaching staff and the campus community to enhance academic advising, academic tracking and scheduling, and communication for student athletes, and really trying to enhance academic outcomes. But she's brought with her one of the coaches that works with her on her staff. And it's so important. We're having a conversation about how to support coaches. We can't have that without having a coach as part of our panel. So we are so thankful for Coach Mike Salinas to have joined us today. He just completed his 2nd year coaching as the head coach for the Javelinas. He's been involved, though, in coaching for more than 20 years. And has always been been really committed to ensuring the best for his student athletes and his staff. And even earlier today, we were chatting in the hallway about just how have things changed in the last 20 years and how we had to really change our approach to having conversations around mental health and mental wellness, not only with our athletes, but also with some newer members of our staff, like incoming GAs. What are the expectations and how have they changed over time? So I'm super excited for this conversation. So here's what we are hoping to accomplish today. We've got our main goals for the session. We're going to be reviewing a little data because if you're stuck with me as your moderator, you know you're going to have to consume a little bit of data. We are also going to definitely revisit the coach-student-athlete relationship and why it is so key to breaking down stigmas around mental health. We'll be emphasizing the value of the coach, not only in terms of sport performance, but really in terms of all those lifelong outcomes that our coaches can share with our student-athletes. And then we will be discussing resources available to coaches to enhance their own mental well-being. So, again, I'm Lydia Bell, Director of Research and Policy at the National Office, and it's important to kind of kick this off by sharing a little bit of data with all of you because next week we'll be actually sharing the public results of our NCAA Coaches Wellbeing Study. I've had the pleasure of already sharing these data with our national SAC bodies in all 3 divisions. I also shared it with Division II Management Council and the President's Council. But next week, this will be publicly available, and all the slides that you see here today and others will be available as a downloadable Division II deck. There'll also be an executive summary as well. This study, the data I'll focus on is specific to Division II, but overall we had just over 6,000 head coaches and assistant coaches take this survey this past spring. The survey was on campus between March and April of 2022, and we really were interested in asking our coaches about their overall experiences in terms of their mental health, but then also what were some challenges they were facing currently coaching in terms of roster management, dealing with issues like transfer. The survey link was sent out to all head coaches directly, and then we asked the head coaches to actually share the link with their staff. But our highest rate of participation was really from those head coaches. And as you can see, in Division II alone, we had just under 1,000 of our Division II head coaches participate, which is about 15% of all Division II head coaches. Also important to note that all sports were represented in terms of not only our championship sports, but our emerging sport coaches as well. Just very briefly, again, all these data will be publicly available, but we had a pretty good response rate from our coaches. About 65% of our sample identified as male head coaches, 35% were female head coaches. That does look similar to our overall representation of head coaches across the division. We also did have demographics questions around race and ethnicity, and then also around sexual orientation. And so when you do look at the data, all of those, we broke it out into a range of demographics groups. So you can take some, for those of you who are kind of data junkies, there'll be a lot of opportunities for deep dives when you look at the data that's available online next week. Just a few key notes from our findings here. Coaches have felt substantial and unique pressures in their jobs over the past several years, and it's certainly manifested itself in high levels of stress and mental exhaustion for many of our coaches. These data are specific to Division II coaches. In blue, you have your head coaches, and then in that yellow, you have your assistant or your associate coaches. But these are responses about whether or not these coaches were facing these issues either constantly or most every day. So this is near constant response rates here, but feeling high levels of mental exhaustion from over a third of our coaches reporting this near constant mental exhaustion, also feeling overwhelmed by all they have to do. And then many of our coaches, almost a third of our head coaches, are also reporting facing sleep difficulties on an almost near constant basis. These items may look familiar to some of you who've seen some of our student athlete surveys. We asked very similar questions to kind of see how do coaches compare to their student athletes. And one thing we did see, which we consistently see with student athlete data, is that women tend to report higher rates of mental health concerns than males. And so we also saw that in our head coach data, where over half of the women in the sample were reporting near constant mental exhaustion and feeling overwhelmed by all they have to do. I also report slightly higher sleep difficulties than their male counterparts. And then there were almost 1 in 5 reporting overwhelming anxiety on a near constant basis. When we asked our coaches about what factors were negatively impacting their mental health, I want to focus to the response all the way over on the left, which is work-related worries. Because that really was the purpose of this survey, was better understanding the work-related pressures. And we did have an open-ended question that really asked our coaches, do you want to tell us a little bit more about those worries? And many provided lengthy responses about all the various pressures that were facing them and had been facing them throughout the pandemic. So whether it was worried about keeping their student athletes safe and trying to maintain COVID protocols, whether it was concerns about finances for their family and making sure that they could, keep their families safe, but then also pressures for them in terms of recruiting and just the changing landscape. They had a lot to tell us about that. And for many of our coaches, it was also about budget cuts, and then also losing staff, and then being unable to replace them. But roster sizes don't shrink when even though you may lose some members of your coaching staff, your roster pretty much stays the same. And so suddenly trying to provide that level of support with a reduced amount of staff was causing a lot of pressure for our coaches as well. Coaches also really noted that they are more concerned than ever about how to support student athletes and their mental health, and that was also something that was weighing on many of them. These data are, again, specific to Division II head coaches. We break it out by those who are coaching men's teams, women's teams, and those who say that they're coaching both men and women. But as you can see, again, over on the left-hand side, for coaches, really supporting student-athlete mental health is an area of high concern, regardless of who they're coaching. But they're also concerned about, preserving physical health for our student-athletes, in some cases navigating COVID-19 protocols, maintaining a safe environment. And particularly for those who are coaching women's teams, you do see that there is a high level of concern for making sure that there's gender equity among the sports within the athletics department. Coaches are also, this is my last slide, are also really having a lot more conversations about mental health, not only with themselves and their own coaching staff, but especially with student athletes. And so what you see in this data is the question about whether or not they were having these conversations more or less than pre-pandemic levels. And so way over on the left-hand side in that dark blue and orange, those are those who say they're having fewer conversations than they did pre-pandemic. Gray is about the same, but what you really see called out here is that yellow and that bright blue, which are those who are having conversations either more or much more than they did prior to the pandemic. And you can see that that's the case not only for talking to their own members of their own staff, but particularly in talking with student athletes. Over 80% of our coaches are noting that they're having these conversations with a much greater degree of frequency than they did at pre-pandemic. Which is why we're here today. So we know that coaches are feeling stressors around their jobs. We know they're facing challenges with roster management, but then also supporting student-athlete mental well-being. So that's just to give you a little snippet of data to then kick off our conversation. So Coach Salinas, I'm coming to you first. As you can see, coaches definitely say they're having a lot more mental wellness conversations than they had before. Is this happening for you on your campus? Are you having more of those conversations with your athletes or with your coaching staff?
Yes, I think there's no question, especially post-pandemic. I think doing this over 20 years, we've all seen the increase in conversations with mental health. I think in the last 5, it's really accelerated, but those are now typical conversations, what we used to call tough conversations, are now happening more frequent. So our student athletes, especially at the Division II level, have different stresses than a Division I athlete. There's the performance piece, which is tough, and they sort of identify themselves with performance, which is hard. So we try to help coach them through that, and then there's navigating their way through finances and social life and adapting to college life as a freshman, and then as they get to some of them the sophomore years, and then experiencing now who they are and who they're trying to be. So the conversations have definitely increased. It's something that we embrace on our campus. I challenge our coaches and myself to make sure that we do a great job. We get great support from our administration in that regard, and are educated on the resources we provide if we can't handle it. But there's no question in terms of the time we spend now dealing with mental health to what I did 10 years ago is dramatically different.
So knowing that there probably aren't a ton of coaches in this room, but there are many administrators who are supporting coaches, are there things that you would suggest to the administrators in this room, what they can do to support coaches, knowing that coaches are having way more of these conversations and that mental health has become such a bigger area of priority for you as a member of the coaching staff?
No question. I'm biased because I think we got one of the best ones in the country at our place. Steve Roach does a great job. Our administration does a great job with us. But I think as administrators, you all are leaders on your campus. You have a different level of stress that sometimes assistant coaches or student athletes aren't aware of. As head coaches, I think we understand. We sit in the same meetings, and we understand it's a longer walk from our side that we sit on to your side of the desk, and you make the tougher decisions. But what I feel helps us at our place is that our administration is, one, extremely supportive. They take time to have meaningful conversations. I think they're mindful of the challenges that we're facing in regards to what we're having to do. They know that things have changed in college athletics, and the landscape and scope and sequence of our job, it's not getting any smaller. If anything, we're adding duties, and I think the biggest thing is that our athletic director, our compliance officer, I think all of our administration understands what we're doing. I think our coaches feel valued. And then the biggest thing is we have the support needed when we go ask for either resources or help in regards to handling some of our student athletes.
That's great. Thank you so much. So Hannah, let's stay with this advice for administrators. How do you emphasize the services that you have in your campus with this open door approach to really mitigate mental health stigma?
The most important thing is making sure our coaches know that they're not in the battle alone in handling the concerns that they have with their student athletes' mental health. It's picking up the phone or walking across campus to your mental health services, your counseling services, and finding out what's available, getting them to come speak to your student athletes, to your coaches, doing the trainings, knowing and educating, hey, this is not your battle, not the student athlete's battle. We're all in this together. The open door policies is crucial. Like, that should be second nature to everything that you do, and just advocating for students to be able to be comfortable in speaking to you or to somebody in your athletic department to get the resources that they need to be healthy, because it's not just physical health that we have to take care of. It's their mental health. It's their emotional health.
And for your program at Kingsville, that's the Innovations-led program, obviously you're targeting first-year athletes, so are there things that you're designing specifically for those first years to address stigma?
Yes, so we're focusing on the goal setting and the transition from high school to college, so that they can make the adjustments and learn how to adult on their own, because they are so used to having somebody guide them every single day of, hey, wake up, go to class, turn in your work, and we'll set the goals for you, and they don't know how to do any of that. So we have to step back and say, all right, they don't know how to do this, so what can we do to help them get to the next level? Because they can't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to be an All-American and go be an All-American. They can't just wake up and say, I'm going to be a 4.0 student when they've only been a 2.5 student. So we have to break down the steps and show them, because once we teach them, they're going to go and do it and be more successful. And that's going to help take care of their mental health, because now instead of shutting down, they can push through it and take care of themselves.
And are coaches engaged in that process, like for your program? And obviously you're targeting first years, but are coaches at least aware of your efforts, and just have they kind of bought into what you're doing?
Yes, so Dr. Shepard, our kinesiology professor who's leading the program, we've educated and shared it all with our coaches, and all of our coaches, we all communicate every day about what's going on and how can we best help our students, whether it's tutoring, counseling, athletic training, physical weight room training, whatever it is. We're constantly talking about what can we do to help our students get to the next level.
Great, thank you so much. So Nate and Jess, can you talk a little bit about Mountain Lion Strong and that initiative at your institution, and a little bit about what it's about, who it's targeting, and then also likely, how are coaches engaged in some capacity?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are in the process of developing a comprehensive psychoeducation program for all of our student athletes on campus. And we're really trying to develop both a leveled and multifaceted approach. And so we're developing that curriculum that's really targeting student athlete resilience and mental wellness. And we're looking at it from 5 levels. So we want a program that can grow with the student athlete through their time on campus. So level 1 being for freshmen, really introducing them to the program, and then helping them as we progress through the levels, sophomore, junior, and senior, to help build skills and then optimize habits that help them with performance and with overall well-being. And then that level 5 being specifically for a healthy transition out of sport. And so we're able to teach that curriculum through student athlete workshops. And we're taking the approach of, for example, level 1, we're going to have all of the freshman student athletes together purposefully, so that they can kind of also meet other student athletes along their same class and level and trajectory outside of just their teammates, so increasing their social wellness as well. In addition to the student athlete workshops, we're also doing coaches education workshops. That's something we heard really strongly from the student athletes is, making sure that the coaches have equally the knowledge and skills on the ways that they influence the student athlete mental health outcomes through the type of team climate that they develop as the team leaders, as the coaches. So we have those. We've added some peer leaders who are leading some peer wellness events. And so the student athletes in our needs assessment really ask for more social events for a time where they can just come together, meet other student athletes, have fun, relax, and really have a break from everything. And so each of our social events has a wellness theme centered on it to really keep that theme going. And so through these various events, we're trying to create as many opportunities as possible for students to intersect with the program and get as many touches as possible. Additionally, we were able to start a peer-led injury support group, which has been really, really positive because so many injured athletes feel that they can get left behind a little bit, and then they're in such a stressful time and space, and they can have each other to talk to other peers from other teams that really understand what they're going through. In addition to that, we also have some working on some increased mental health screenings to have more timely mental health referrals at multiple time points throughout the year, as well as suicide prevention training.
Yeah, well said, Jess. And I would just add, I think from a coaches and student athlete engagement perspective, one, it was really important for us when we started the program to get a kind of an assessment and hear from our student athletes. And that's where Jess really started with some of those surveys and hearing from our students what are the mental health needs on our campus, within our programs. And then we've also done some specific trainings for our coaches, which we felt was really important to get that initial buy-in of, coaches, I think, were hesitant of who are these people that are going to be coming into my program and maybe changing up some things or telling me that, maybe I should look at doing things different. But those kind of initial engagement opportunities, I think, were really critical for the success of this program starting out, and has really helped us kind of roll with it because we got really quick buy-in, and we also heard what the needs were to be able to build kind of the program around the specific needs. Jess mentioned the injured student athlete kind of group, and that was a really kind of grassroots. It came from our students. They're like, hey, our student athletes who are going through injuries want some support, and so we created a group, and it was really been student-led, and we've had great buy-in from our coaches, and it's also allowed us to engage with our coaches with their own mental and physical health and with what they're doing within the program supporting our student athletes.
Sounds like an incredibly comprehensive program.
A few ducks going on.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot happening. But one thing I was hoping, Jess, that you wouldn't mind talking to people about. I know you have been talking about a wellness wheel as helping not only your student athletes, but also your coaches kind of conceptualize the broader, ecosystem surrounding mental wellness. Would you mind just kind of walking people through your preliminary wellness wheel and just kind of giving us some insight?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something we're developing. So when we initially proposed the program, much of my background is in sports psychology, and so we're looking, what are the main drivers that really impact that student-athlete mental wellness. So we were looking at things like multifaceted identity, healthy relationships, the mind-body connection, goal setting, time management, those types of things. And so through our interdisciplinary student team that I work with, we are working on developing both the student-athlete specific wellness wheel as well as the coaches specific wellness wheel. And so this is a really easy way to present and teach those concepts to our student athletes and coaches. And so we chose these 5 dimensions of wellness specifically because they are so impactful for not only that student athlete mental wellness and also their academic and athletic performance and success. So we have their social wellness, right? So healthy relationships, sense of belonging on campus, really working on helping student athletes to support them in expanding their social support networks outside of their team and outside of their sport. So if they have those experiences of injury or when they leave their sport, they are not feeling like that bucket is dropping out so much. The physical wellness, we're really teaching them really starting at that freshman level that you've got to take care of the basics first. You can't show up to practice and hope to perform if you don't have those quality inputs of sleep, nutrition, hydration, just the very basics for those. Mental wellness at the center there, and so really helping them realize, how much that cognitive process, the thinking, the brain health, working on reducing the stigma of mental health, all the things that go into all the learning and decision making they need to do with the mental space every single day. We have the emotional wellness, so really also with reducing the mental health stigma, also a key component of that is normalizing emotional experiences and emotional regulation, right? So normalizing talking about emotions, knowing that experiencing that full range of emotions is like one of the most natural parts of the human experience, and being able to identify when they are feeling dysregulated and teaching them the skills to re-regulate or regulate optimally for them for performance on and off the field. And then the spiritual wellness part, so really, helping them do some reflection on living through their values, what's their sense of purpose, what's their why. If they've played their sport their whole life, they can get a little bit burnt out sometimes, and so helping them refocus their why and their sense of purpose, and revisiting why they love their sport and what parts of it bring them joy to kind of help re-energize them.
That's great, thank you. I think, Nathan, this one's going to be for you, but I think it's something that Coach Salinas was also talking about is obviously there's a lot of expectation for coaches to be aware of mental health concerns and to provide support for student athletes, but not support. We don't expect our coaches to be, coaches are not clinicians, that's not their role. The role is really to identify and to refer. But one thing that we've been chatting about in our pre-conversations was really around the serious topic of suicidal ideation. And I know that at Colorado Springs, you all had an opportunity to do some QPR training. That was something for both your coaches and your administrators. If you wouldn't mind just telling people a little bit about what QPR is and how that's kind of part of your ways of empowering your staff to know how to help students in need, that'd be great.
Yeah, this is a great question, and something that I think a lot of us are probably discussing, whether it be on our campus or within our conference or within Division II. But QPR training stands for Question, Persuade, Refer, which is a suicide prevention training. This was something that I think personally I'd heard about, and then really gained some steam within our conference, and we had a student athlete do a presentation at our conference meetings last year. This was kind of also in line with the time that Jess and I were talking about the Mountain Lion Strong program and the research grant, and building QPR training into our overall program. But we started off with coaches and staff all going through it. It was my first time going through it, and it was just extremely impactful, just from really normalizing how to have the conversation around suicide, and how to look for signs, and how to not be afraid to ask the hard questions and to really address it specifically and directly. We did some role playing. We had two of our coaches that did a role play, and it was super awkward at first, but by the end of the session, I think we all really kind of had some light bulb moments around our role within athletics, our role in terms of relationship to our student athletes, and how those conversations very well could come to the forefront within our conversations with student athletes, or really in any aspect of life, because of the role we have as coaches, as administrators. But it's something I would encourage all of you to consider. It's something that our conference is taking really serious. I know every member within the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference is rolling out some kind of QPR training within their department. One of our goals is to have every student athlete go through QPR training by the time they leave UCCS. So we've started with a lot of our student leaders, captains, upperclassmen, and then I'll have more opportunities to kind of roll that out. But again, it's been something that's been super impactful for our campus, as well as for myself personally and for our coaching staff, just to have that conversation and also learn some really important tools about how to treat suicide prevention.
That's awesome. So it seems like at Colorado Springs, you all have really made a concerted effort to make sure that mental wellness is just part of your ecosystem, and that it's something that you've included in it, an expectation across the department and for your student athletes, that they're aware of it and then they know how to refer one another. So thinking of this though, there's so much already on the plates of our coaches and our administrators. So this could be for any of you, but when we are trying to think about how to better support our coaches and support our student athletes in terms of mental health, when we think about it, are we adding to the expectations and to the workday, Or are we shifting things around to make room for it, but then also, still maintaining that expectation of, a typical work week? So is this an and, or are we shifting things around to make room for it, but then are we letting something else go? So I don't know, Coach Salinas, you want to talk a little bit about that? Maybe you can have this one first, or Hannah. But with this expectation of being much more knowledgeable about mental health, do you see this as increasing your role and all the expectations on you, or do you feel like it's just kind of shifted things in the way you do the work that you do?
I think we all have to be willing to adapt and change, right? Things are changing, and we have to be willing to change either faster to or equal to the rate of change. So there is some shifts taking place, but I think it's just something that we've added. It becomes part of our daily life now, and as I alluded to earlier, we need to identify the problem, help the student athlete identify the problem, and then encourage them to use the resources provided on campus. But I think everyone knows that this is a piece now that we're going to have to deal with. So we need to make sure we're educated. We need to make sure we continue to understand and utilize all the resources we have around us.
Does anyone else want to jump in on that one?
I will. I don't think it's an additional responsibility that we're adding to our plate. We've promised in the recruiting process to the parents that we're going to take care of the student, and we're just stepping up to the plate. We're just being responsible adults, looking out for 18 to 24-year-olds who are making that transition through life, and that's just part of the day-to-day of our job. So it's just becoming second nature.
Anyone else? Feel free to jump in, or that we can open back up.
Yeah, I would just add that hopefully with administrators providing quality education and professional development to the coaches so that they feel well equipped, it won't have to feel like an addition or you have to subtract something else, but it'll feel like you've got some really wonderful tools because that mental wellness is truly the foundation for being able to execute optimal performance or grow into an optimal athlete. So hopefully it can be viewed as redefining what excellence can mean and what success can be defined as.
Yeah, no, that's great. We'll, as I promised, we'd have a chance to ask questions in the middle. So for any of you out there, does anyone have a question that they would like addressed now? Or would you like to continue to have the conversation and save your questions till the end? So there are microphones at the front and then also in the middle. So we do ask that you use that just so everyone can hear your question. But if there are any questions, I definitely welcome people to come up. I'll count to 30 in my head, and if nobody comes up, we'll just go to the next round of questions. Miles, are you coming up? Yeah, right. Got to count on National SAC to always be the ones to have the question.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Miles Jackson, and I'm from Queens College. I'm a track and field and cross-country student athlete, and I am an at-large SAC rep. You all spoke about the resources that are available for student athletes and coaches to better have an understanding or knowledge of their mental health and ways that they can cope with it. But in reviewing the data that we saw earlier, you can see that some of the factors that affected the mental health of the coaches particularly were like work, time management, or work-related financial issues also. Are we just cushioning the problem by providing resources for coaches and student athletes to better adapt to the environment, or are there any practical measures being put in place to actually address the issue of maybe coaches not being paid enough? Because you can provide resources for coaches to better deal with their mental health. But if we don't focus on the exact issue of maybe not being paid enough or having to overwork, is there anything being done in place to address the issue directly? Thank you.
You always can count on National SAC to have the best questions. All right, I open it up. Nathan, I think looks like you're heading towards it.
Good question. I think one of my reflections, particularly with our last year with rolling out this program, is really looking at I'll say most of my coaches, if not all of my coaches, there's times of the year where they just grind, and they are at work as much as they possibly can. And I think that's something that in reflecting on this and thinking through and having conversations with coaches of making it a point of saying, hey, when's your next vacation? What time are you taking off? Or how's your family? Or when's the last time, or hey, you had to miss a kid's basketball game or something like that, that I think in relationship you know what's important to those people. And I think those are some of the things that just having these conversations more top of mind and the training more top of mind and the things that are, I think, are becoming more critical to address so that we don't see levels of burnout, we don't see levels of people getting out of the business because they just can't handle it anymore. I think have been really important. I think it's really helped me connect with coaches maybe in new and important ways. To your question around pay, I think anybody in Division II that's a struggle, and it's particularly when we have, I would say for my head coaches, pay isn't as big of an issue as pay for their assistant coaches is at the moment, and particularly those assistant coaches that are underpaid, overworked. I mean, those are the people that are not making much, but we're asking to do a ton, but they're trying to build a resume and rise through the ranks and get that next job or move on to be a head coach or whatever it is. And those are really hard things to address in sports, right? Because at some point you have to do those things. I think I could speak for myself, and probably a lot of us in this room are sitting here saying, like, I remember when I worked for nothing, but that's how I got to where I am today. And we just kind of do that in sports. So I think there's some good questions out there around, should we still be doing that? Is that still what it should look like? Should we still be doing unpaid things? I don't know. But we should be considering those as leaders in sport and having those conversations when we need and identifying where those fit within our campuses.
Great. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to head to Coach Salinas. So, as we saw, and many of our coaches themselves are struggling with mental, feeling burnout, feeling high levels of anxiety. What resources do you think would be beneficial for coaches to support their own mental wellness? Whether they're resources that you currently have and you feel like others should model them, or things that you know that you and your staff would really benefit from?
Just for our staff, making sure that we continue to challenge each other and model what we're trying to sell to our student athletes. We need to understand sometimes working harder and longer isn't always better, and I'm probably the worst one at that with my staff, but I let them know just because my light's on doesn't mean y'all got to stay here, so y'all are a lot smarter than I am. Get it done, but again, I think the biggest thing for our staff is our administration and the support they have, the support we have from our athletic director, and knowing that we are sometimes managing a roster of 130 athletes and understaffed, and what our graduate assistant situation is, or a restricted earning position. But I know in leadership positions as ADs, if you can validate it and you see coaches struggling to get it done, our athletic director has done a great job. We've added full-time staff. We've increased the salary pool for our assistants, which is supposed to help with retention, but we lost one late. I don't think we shouldn't have with coaches, but they're doing everything they can from an administration standpoint to ensure that we're able to do those things and not get overworked. And again, I think I challenge our staff to make sure that they represent us the right way in every aspect of the job, on the field and in campus, and to be involved in things we're responsible for and to get done. But as administrators, if you can help grow the job, right, and help your head coaches with the challenges they face, help the assistant salary pool, and ensuring that they have adequate help. And if your university and institution has it in there, you're the folks that we count on to go fight to get that done. And I know I commend everybody in the room, all of you guys as leaders and ADs. It's a thankless job sometimes, but we need you, and what you're doing is important. Sometimes you guys got to go take all the bullets in terms of with the president and everybody else who thinks they know how the program should be done. But I guarantee you, whether they tell you or not, your coaches appreciate you, and what you do matters. So I just challenge you to continue to fight the good fight, right, in regards to your coaches and all of your student athletes.
I think part of it too is that many of our campuses actually have resources for staff in terms of mental health, whether that's through the insurance plan or maybe there's some kind of, that maybe your HR department across the university has made some partnerships, but part of it could also be making sure that our coaching staff and the rest of our athletic staff are aware of those benefits and are encouraged to take advantage of some of those benefits as well. I don't know, Nathan, if there's anything in particular you feel like, as athletics director, is there anything in particular that you feel like you could do to better support coaches, or things you've already been doing to better support your coaches in terms of their own mental wellness? Yeah,
I think in preparing for this session, when we were talking about it, I was reflecting on one of the coaches meetings that we had, where it was the first time in my entire time at UCCS where we actually carved out, and Jess was great. She brought, mental health, basically inventory worksheet for all of our coaches to do. And then, after that, we kind of paired up coaches and, shared with one another. And then after that, there was probably another hour or so at lunch where the conversation continued. And I was thinking, I think that's the first time that we've ever done something like that, like actually carved out time, intentional time, where it wasn't just like a tip of the hat 15 minutes of an agenda item, but we actually were really intentional about sharing and reflecting within ourselves, but then sharing it out with one another, and then as an entire staff on some of the things we're struggling with, or some of the things that are going well, or some of the best practices that we had in terms of working with student athletes. And so that's something that we've tried to now carry on, and making that more part of just a staff meeting, where we can carve out time beyond just, hey, how's everybody doing? Okay, great. Well, now let's get on to business. But I think I look forward to more of those opportunities, and I think it was really great to get buy-in from our coaching staff about how can I now translate that maybe within a team environment as well, and some of the things that we've been able to offer, and Jess has been great in doing team-specific sessions with each of our programs as well. So I think that's been a real specific piece that we've been able just to kind of add to how we interact and how we meet as a staff and as a department.
That's great. I think one other thing I would want to ask you, Nathan, to start with, and we can open it to some others if they want to contribute too, but when we're thinking about how we evaluate coaches at the end of a season, obviously, it's more, is it beyond just wins and losses? Are we now also thinking about how coaches promote a community of wellness among their athletes? And has that also changed, thinking about that, are you now factoring that into how you're evaluating, or at least in those conversations you're having at the year end with your employees and their reviews?
Sure, and I think it's easy to just evaluate coaches based on wins and losses, which we all have to do. It's part of the business. We have to look at how competitive were our teams, how competitive is our program, and what's the future look like. But I would say, with having the wellness wheel up on the screen, my best coaches and my best programs are really good at all of those aspects. They're not just good at the physical, or they're not just good at the mental. They're good at all of it, and they're my head coaches that are touching all of those things and excelling in those areas are my best coaches. And I think those are the things we can add to an evaluation that we have added of, hey, I think we're practicing too much. Like, I've had this conversation with coaches. I think you're overworking your kids. Or, hey, I noticed that you were the only coach that didn't attend that nutrition seminar, or whatever that conversation looks like. I think has to be part of our evaluation, because I would expect many athletic directors in the room would agree that your best coaches are really good at all of these. And not that this is the key. This is something that we can use at UCCS, but my best coaches, when I evaluate them, we can talk about any one of those aspects, and they're exceeding in.
Yeah, that's great. Does anyone else want to talk a little bit about, I think mental wellness ties in to wins and performance, and on the field, or on the track or on the court anyway, right? Like, if you have a team that has a culture of wellness, it is likely to also translate into a team that's successful on, in their sport as well as across the campus. Is that something that you all are has that kind of worked its way into the way that you're talking about having a culture of mental wellness? Are you tying it to actual performance athletically?
We are, so at different times throughout the past couple of years, each one of our programs has done something different. Our women's basketball program this year got a leadership coach who did a bunch of vision board training with them at the beginning of the season to help them learn to visualize their success and different things. A couple of years ago, our head baseball coach worked directly with our campus sports psychologists in the kinesiology department to do mental toughness training to help his program be successful. So each program finds a different niche every year to see what works for them to develop that mental toughness and train that mental toughness so that they can get to the next step in their success, whether it's going to be success academically or athletically, or combine it all together.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. All right. I want to make sure we leave time for questions. So I've got one last question for each of you, but your answer can only be one sentence, which is tough, I know. But what is one best practice that you would leave as a takeaway for the administrators in this room? What is one best practice to supporting coach mental well-being and promoting a culture of mental wellness in your department? What is one takeaway, one sentence you would share with the audience? And Nathan, I'll start with you. No pressure.
Don't be afraid to start. I think that, can I explain?
Yes, go ahead.
That'd
That's
be
okay. It's
one
okay.
sentence.
You're
Don't
allowed
be
a little
afraid
explanation.
And I think that was one of my fears was rolling out a program like this, what you might uncover, what you might find out, and what we found out has been, we've got some work to do, but we also have some really great things to build on. And I think it was a little bit scary of like what's going to happen if we roll out this big program. And I think ultimately what we found is that we're supporting our students at a much higher level, we're supporting our coaches at a much higher level, and we're building a program that's hopefully going to benefit places beyond just UCCS.
That's awesome. Okay, don't be afraid to start. That's number one. Jess?
I think mine would be to take a human-centered values approach to your athletic departments. And so not underestimating the power that the administrative leadership has to set the tone for the mission and values of your program that's then given down to the coaches, that the coaches will then deliver to their student athletes. So if you're looking at your mission and vision and values and program objectives, do you have those? Do you have well-being and mental wellness and at the center of those? Are they prioritized, and then are they followed up and followed through with when those aren't happening on particular teams as well?
Okay, great. Prioritize your humans. Okay, Hannah.
Ask all the questions, the hard ones, the easy ones, the in-betweens.
Ooh, that was good. Very succinct. Coach Salinas.
I think just to continue to be insightful, right? Mindful of what your staff and coaches are doing. Continue to have meaningful conversations in regards to mental health and wellness, and just again encourage everyone. It's no longer a topic that somebody's scared to broach. Just dive into it, and if we got to identify issues, identify them, and then encourage folks to get help.
And to what you said before, don't be afraid to adapt, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Can
Awesome.
I add one thing,
Yep,
Lydia?
go ahead.
I'm never a rule follower. So I just want to be sure no one leaves the session without writing down for me the 988, if you're not aware of it already. So it's a new national mental health hotline. So just like 911 for medical emergencies, 988 you can call or text 24/7 to be connected with mental health resources. So if you can write it down and then tell someone else who's not in that session, so that becomes just as common as we know 911 is really important.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jess. All right, we will open it up for questions. We have about 8 minutes for questions from all of you before we wrap up this session. So please come on up to the microphone. Feel free to ask this super knowledgeable panel whatever questions you have. All right.
Hey, I don't really have a question, but I did just want to, from a personal note, reiterate something that you talked about. I'm the SWA and volleyball coach, so I'm in the coaching world as well at Harding University. In 2021, for me personally and professionally with my team, I just hit a place where I was not able to continue without professional help. And at that time, I didn't really know. I knew our campus resources, but they were being flooded with students at the time, and so found a therapist myself and realized we had a great plan and it was affordable for me. So, you know, Miles, I think you mentioned being able to pay coaches more so they can afford all this care, which is great, but if that's not an option, you know, talking to your HR and figuring out what your healthcare plan is mental health covered in that? Because as a coach, when you come up to it and you need it and then you find out, oh, I can do this is going to help me, it is affordable, that was huge in my experience. So.
Yeah, thank you so
That's
much.
it, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You know, again, just making resources that you already have available, increasing people's awareness of the resources that they have, and just making that part of the conversation. Maybe you stick it up on a bulletin board somewhere in the athletics department, just so that your coaches and your other members of your staff just know that it's available and it's a resource that they can take advantage of. That's great. Thank you so much for that comment. Anyone else? Come on up, ask some. Whoop, we got one.
Have to put Coach Salinas on the spot, being a fellow Lone Star Conference member. And so working with football for 20 plus years like you, how have you coached your coaches to change the mentality that typical football coaches have on mental toughness? And would you give your definition of what mental toughness is?
I think, I mean, we talk about toughness, discipline, and effort, right? We sort of cut our teeth on those three things, but we relate it to life. You need a level of toughness in sport and in life. You need a level of discipline in sport and in life. You need a level of effort in both. So in mental toughness, it doesn't always have to be I think the body's got so many flaws, right? I'm still a firm believer that we can't just beat each other up every day. The goal is to get to Saturday. So we have to teach our guys in terms of being smart. But mental toughness for me is guys doing what's required, right? And being at your best when it's required. How do you get there? There's a constant preparation to that, and you're going to have a level of toughness, but it's not, we're going to get on the line and run 20 gassers and we're going to scrimmage for 2 hours. I just think the sport has changed. Football has changed. We understand the dynamic that goes into it. So she did ask a really tough question. I don't think I've answered it yet. But Sarah, in regards to mental toughness, I just think in regards to sport, I think we got the best job in the world. We get to teach life through sport. So we try to everything we do, we relate to life, right? And how it's going to translate. If you want a certain outcome, you got to be willing to do this. And then in today's day and age with social media, it's different than when I grew up and when I was in school. Guys identifying themselves with their performance. So you have performance-based issues that lead to mental health issues. You have the social media aspect of it. So they're dealing with a whole different deal of toughness, one that I didn't have to worry about. You know, everything they do is either there's a picture of it, there's a video of it, something's going on, and then it's on social media instantly. So we try to just make sure that we're, again, mindful of what they're going through. We try to communicate, encourage, but I think the biggest thing to help them is to build intentional relationships, meaningful relationships where they're comfortable coming to us. And then I think through our program, in terms of how we do things, we try to build a level of toughness. It's hard to get up at 5:15 and get to work out and be dressed. It's hard to be unselfish. I think all the things we do, so there's not a two-word answer to your question. I just think it's a culmination of things that we do in our program that allows them to build a level of mental toughness that's going to ensure they have success when they get out into the real world. I still don't think I answered it, Sarah.
All right. I always want to give people a chance, just in case there's someone about to make that question. I really want to thank all of you for being here today, for your high level of engagement with our fabulous panel. We are so lucky to have, I think it's so neat to have both researchers, athletics administrators who care passionately, coaches who are willing to speak to it, all being part of this broader conversation, not only in supporting student athletes, but then also thinking about mental wellness more broadly. And knowing that, as we said, these are conversations we're expected to, that we need to start having. But to Nathan's point, we just need to don't be afraid to start, right? If you're not already doing it, you know, it may be scary, but it's an important thing just to start asking the questions and to have a check-in with both our coaches and our athletes that are more than just, everyone okay? All right, let's keep going. But really, how are you doing? How are things going for you, not only professionally, but also in your world, and building those relationships and that human connection. So again, just absolute thank you to our 4 fabulous panelists. We really hope that all of you maybe took away 1 or 2 nuggets that you can take back to your campuses and put into practice on your own. Of course, I have to give you all my NCAA reminders. Definitely feel free to join the conversation using the social media hashtag NCAACONV, our convention hashtag. You can follow the NCAA on Twitter for updates throughout the session. And then, of course, all of you know that there is a survey that you can take about the session that's in your convention app. So it's just 3 simple questions. Really important, and don't leave the convention center too quickly, because as you all know, the state of college sport is happening today here in this building, down in the Stars at Night Ballroom on this floor. You don't even have to leave the floor. You can just stay right here. And that will be happening at 4 o'clock, and then right after that will be the delegates reception. So that will be down in the exhibit hall. So definitely encourage you to stay around, stay part of the conversation. And again, just a huge thank you to our fabulous panelists for today's great conversation. All right, have a great day and a great rest of the convention, and of course, make it yours.
Yeah, great job. Thanks.